Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 2, Episode 9. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
Today we're going to be talking about the broader ecosystem of last-mile delivery and the role of third-party services, specifically Instacart, with our special guest, Kiri Masters, founder and CEO of Bobsled Marketing, co-author of Instacart for CMOs, a follow-up to her great 2019 book, Amazon for CMOs. You know, Steve, to help the audience and help the listeners frame the interview to them, I want to talk about online shopping and how it has evolved. I mean, depending on the way you look at the statistics, thanks to the great acceleration of the COVID era, I'm sure we're north of 20% of core retail in the U.S. done online right now, more or less the same thing around the world, a bit less in Canada, a bit more in England. Let's talk about you for a little bit. How are you shopping? How do you shop?
Let's talk about me.
How much of your shopping is done online? Do you plan on changing? What kind of shopper are you?
Well, I think I'm. I hate to say bifurcated, but that's my thing. I think for things that are very convenience oriented, I'm overwhelmingly an online shopper. I do a ton of online shopping, but it's almost all for things that I don't care that much to get involved in the purchase. So, basic items. I do a lot of gift shopping online because I just don't like dealing with the stores in the holiday period. This is pre-COVID. So I'm a big online shopper, but it's very much on convenience oriented when I pretty much know what I want and just want a good price and want to get it over with. But I'm pretty much an in-store shopper when it comes to things like groceries and clothing. And, I do like being able to see things. It's not necessarily so much the immediate gratification. Sometimes it is. So, COVID didn't change my shopping behavior all that much, other than I would say I certainly made fewer trips, like a lot of people. I made fewer trips to the store.
Bigger baskets.
And I consolidated. I consolidated. But I didn't have like a big switch to online grocery shopping or anything like that. I would say I probably do more research online before going to the store. That maybe changed a little bit, but that's been growing for me. So I don't know how representative I am, but I do like the physical store shopping or experience for some stuff, and other things I'm like all the way online, baby.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's some things I just don't care about. I love the product, but I don't care about the experience. So I always talk about pet foods. I love my dog, and I buy him the best food, but I get nothing from going to the pet food store and buying a 50-pound bag and schlepping it around, the de-schlepping of retail as you described it. It's perfect. It just shows up in my door. I love it. He loves it. It's a great solution. And talking about that, we've seen this explosion of third-party delivery services, particularly in grocery and with the restaurants. Let me ask you this as a strategist. Do you believe the trade-off of having your customers build loyalty to the third-party delivery system at the start and the end of the journey is a risk worth taking?
Well, it certainly makes me nervous to have customers go elsewhere to form perhaps a lasting relationship with a third-party company. So, on the one hand, I think if you can avoid doing it, you would rather own that relationship, own the data, own the access, the direct access to the customer if you possibly can. I think the challenge is, which, I think we'll get into with Kiri a little bit, is, in some cases, it's just not possible for certain size retailers to have the scale to really do that. And so they really don't have a choice as a practical matter of doing it. And in the other cases, if consumer behavior just shifts so much fundamentally to that sort of behavior, you don't want to fight fundamentally against what customers want. So I think it's very challenging. And certainly it's going to be an issue that more retailers are going to have to cope with, because I think we're certainly on even with some moderation of the trends we've seen during COVID, I mean, we certainly have seen a huge growth in delivery services.
And I know for some grocers that I've talked to, it's a bit of a hybrid, right? In the major metropolitan areas, they get enough volume and enough, route density, as they would call, to do it themselves. But in other smaller communities, they're like, we can't build that kind of density. Let's go for the third party that works for other people. So, all right. Now, just before we bring Kiri on, you've got the revised and expanded second edition of your book, Remarkable Retail, coming out very soon. And we're doing a couple of special events to celebrate it, right?
Yes. So on Monday, April 12th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Trevor Sumner is hosting a special edition of his This Week in Retail, which is a Clubhouse thing he does every week. And we're going to do a Remarkable Retail takeover. And a number of friends will be joining us. So if you're on Clubhouse, check that out. And then the next day, Tuesday, April 13th, also at 5 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be doing a virtual book launch event on Zoom. And we'll have several special guests, including Sucharita Kodali from Forrester, Seth Godin, and several other friends. And you are nice enough to have agreed to host that. So save those dates, and we'll be providing all the details in the show notes and on social media. And so I think at this point, I'll stop all the shameless self-promotion, and we'll bring on the star of the show, Kiri Masters, and talk all about Instacart.
Kiri, welcome to Remarkable Retail Podcast. How are you doing this morning?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's morning where you are. It's evening where we are. We're going global on the podcast. Welcome, and thanks again for joining Steve and I. Well, why don't we just jump right in? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional journey, and what you do at and what Bobsled is all about.
Sure. So I started a digital agency focused on helping brands with their Amazon sales channel back in early 2015 called Bobsled Marketing. I didn't come to that world with any agency experience or even much experience with retail. I was a commercial banker before that, but I started an e-commerce business and sort of figured out some things to do with Amazon. So what do you do next? Of course, you start an agency. So that was early 2015, really drinking from the fire hose there. Today, we're a team of 35 people. We work mostly with mid-sized consumer product brands on Amazon, but also Walmart and Instacart now as well.
Now, where were you when you started this agency? Because right now we're talking to you in Perth, Australia.
Yeah.
I don't think I think Amazon's fairly new to the Australian market, actually.
Yeah, launched here in 2017, but it's still pretty small part of the retail landscape. So yeah, I lived in New York for about 6 years, and that's where I started Bobsled. So the company is based out of the US. The team's in the US and Europe. I'm the only one in this awful time zone.
That was worst places to be.
And so how I know Steve actually because we both contribute to Forbes Retail, and back when we went to conferences, sort of bump into each other along the way there.
What is this? What are these conferences you speak of?
I don't know. It's all a bit fuzzy to me now.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yes, I think I saw you at NRF last year, about 4 weeks before the wheels came off. So
that's right. Your book I got the galley copy of your book.
Yeah.
And then it all, the world changed.
Yeah, I heard something about that. So speaking of books, how's that for a very smooth segue? You've got a new book out that you've co-written with, I believe, your colleague at Bobsled, Stefan Jordev, called Instacart for CMOs. So tell us a little bit about what the book's about and why you decided to release that now.
Yeah, so Instacart for CMOs really is a playbook for brands, for consumer brands who are looking to understand the Instacart platform and what they can do to influence sales there and reach customers there. Instacart really came onto the radar of a lot of consumer brands in 2020 for two reasons. One, the pandemic and the huge migration over to grocery delivery apps like Instacart. And Instacart also released its self-service ad platform in May of 2020, which opened up a new retail media channel for a lot of brands who are interested in targeting shoppers at the point of purchase while they're building their shopping cart on Instacart. So lots of interest from brands, but not very much documented in the way of playbooks or like a roadmap for brands wanting to understand how does content work, how does inventory work, how does, what are the advertising options. So at Bobsled, we do a lot of thought leadership content, and we just saw a huge white space for this topic around Instacart and addressing all the questions that we were starting to receive from brands. So Stefan, who's our Director of Marketplace Strategy and Insights, and I sat down, we interviewed about 10 brands ranging from multinationals like Revlon to challenger brands like Simple Mills and a few partner like solution providers in there like Profitero and PackView, who have a lot of data and insight on how the platform works. So it's really the first and most comprehensive guide to Instacart out there for brands.
Well, I love all the detail. Maybe we could just start. I mean, I actually thought I had a fairly good understanding of what Instacart was, but I have to say your book gave me a new appreciation for the richness of it. So maybe just for people that aren't as familiar with Instacart, maybe you could just describe what Instacart is about and maybe talk about some of the different components of their strategy and their offering.
Sure. So there's a few things here, a few concepts that I think one that's unique to Instacart is that it's a four-sided marketplace. So with online marketplaces like Amazon or Walmart, you've typically got two-sided marketplace between the brand and the shopper, and also Walmart and Amazon sell their own products as well. That is still a two-sided marketplace in that Walmart or Amazon is selling to the shopper there. But Instacart has four stakeholders. There is the customer, the end customer, the shopper, who's the gig worker sort of zipping around picking your order, and they interact together, the shopper and the customer, and figure out replacements and things like that. I've even heard of shoppers recommending products to customers. And then you've got the retailer and the advertisers. So the advertisers, at least right now, are pretty much all the brands who have their products available to sell on Instacart. So that's a four-sided marketplace, and that creates a bit more complexity in the relationship that brands have with Instacart, because the brand can't control content, pricing, availability and assortment on Instacart in the same way that they can do on Amazon and Walmart and all the other marketplaces. So the fact that the retailer is at the center of the relationship and controls so much of the experience is very unique to Instacart.
I imagine it creates some complexity too, though, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're a brand and you don't have control over where your products are, where your products are available to customers, you might be dark on a whole region. And that's just because your retailer hasn't integrated properly with Instacart. A lot of, especially grocery retailers, are notoriously behind on their inventory management software. And so you've got no control over availability as a brand. So it's a very unique situation.
Have you heard of, I'm going to pull on a couple of threads around this four-sided market. Have you heard of brand CPG companies spiffing the gig worker, the shopper, in other words, incenting them to recommend one thing over another where that opportunity comes up? It feels like there's opportunities at each point for that to happen.
I haven't heard of that, and I actually imagine it would be quite difficult because they're, like you said, they're gig workers, they're not employees of Instacart. How would you find those people, and actually communicating with them on a mass scale would be very difficult. I've heard of it more so there was some a customer who commented, "Wow, I'm so happy with my Instacart shopper." They saw that the Clorox wipes were in stock in a store, and they asked if I wanted some because it was so rare to see Clorox wipes. Right. So it was more like in-store shoppers are not incentivized to cross-sell or upsell or anything like that. They've got a very specific job to do.
Yeah, and that specific job is really rooted around the consumer, basically, right? Is to do right by them so they get tipped, right? So they get a bit of incentive on top of their base. Is that the way it works around the world? Is the model similar no matter where they operate? Is there any differences? I mean, I know, U.S. States like California have or are pending gig worker legislation. So do they flex their model a bit around that?
Not right now. So Instacart is, just from a footprint standpoint, it's available to 85% of US households and 70% of Canadian households. So it's still only operates in those two markets. But one of the big advantages that the company has is its footprint and the extent of the relationships it's built up with retailers. From a labor perspective, Instacart does not have a unionized workforce right now. That could change, and that is a threat to the company. But that's why for some retailers who do have unionized workforces, it is a good solution, because they wouldn't be able to go out and replicate this themselves with their unionized workforce.
Yeah, not easily. So let's talk about that. What makes Instacart different, other than the fact there's a Canadian founder? Apurva Mehta is Canadian, so that makes them special, at least in my eyes anyway.
I had the under, by the way, on when Michael was going to bring that up at 11. I went.
It's only a matter of time. And part of their tailwind came from when they did the big deal with Loblaw here in Canada as well, which was a pretty huge deal for them. But I turned my mind to, Target, for example, who had, I believe, a relationship with them and then decided to kind of backward integrate and buy shipped. And, other choices are made at any given time by retailers. Was it a first mover? And so far they've just been able to get the momentum and build big enough, and now that's going to be hard to shake them out. Is what that is roots into their core key advantage, why so many retailers turn to Instacart?
I think it is. I think that the cut through that they already have with the, again, 85% of US shoppers and 70% of Canadian shoppers, there's no competitor that really comes close to that. And as you alluded to, Instacart has partnerships with 9 of the top 10 US retailers. Not all of them are full-fledged. Some of them are still pilot stage, but you don't get those kind of partnerships over the course of a few months. That is a huge effort, and I can't even imagine the enterprise sales process that they went through to get these retailers on board. So that is actually a massive barrier, is their existing partnerships with so many retailers and so many of the large ones. And you would have seen that they've been expanding way beyond grocery into other verticals as well, like Sephora, Best Buy are now partners as well. So it's I think Indigo Books and Gifts in Canada. I got my super last minute Christmas gift with an Instacart order on great.
Indigo.
Well, that's actually that is another great use case, is the sort of like immediate gratification, and that's something that in the book we talk about. Elf Cosmetics, they provide a number of different delivery options to customers on their website. You can purchase from Sephora, you can purchase from their D2C site, and they also provide an option. Do you want to get it within 2 hours with Instacart and get that immediate gratification, essentially? So that's a great use case that brands are seeing with Instacart as well, is that through this platform you can create an immediate 2-hour delivery for someone. And I'd say, just to sort of close out the second main advantage that I see with Instacart over competitors is its technology. And this has been, core. They don't have stores, they don't have warehouses, they don't have, employed shoppers. The asset that Instacart has is its technology. And the biggest thing that you've got to get right with this type of business is route density. It's really essential to Instacart's business model to have that many retailers on board and to have a level of critical demand flowing through their platform to actually make the economics work. If you don't have enough deliveries scheduled for a driver on a day, you can't make that a profitable route. So Instacart's really been the company that's mastered that route density and delivery technology. They have their own map algorithm, and that's another huge barrier to entry to actually build that technology.
It feels like it's a bit of a race between building loyalty to Instacart and building loyalty to your own brand? I mean, I've been in similar discussions around coalition loyalty programs, right? Do you start your own? Do you join on someone else's? There's pros and cons to each. But, if I'm sitting in the chair of I'm running a grocery store, I want my customers to be loyal to me, not whatever service. I don't want that service to pick up my customers and move them somewhere else. So it does feel like a bit of an arms race. If you, in your discussions with, both brands and CPG and retailers, how are they looking at that right now?
So the brands are, in a lot of cases, sort of ambivalent as to where they reach the customer, as long as they can control the message and they have some mechanisms to reach them, like through advertising and display the right content at the right time. They're okay, like Elf Cosmetics, for example, they're okay if a customer shops on Amazon or Instacart or their D2C site or Sephora, wherever it is, they're okay with that. They recognize, different channels for different situations and different shoppers. But the retailers certainly are concerned with having this intermediary now between them and the shopper. And a research report that we cited in the book from Barclays Equities Research showed that shoppers would switch to a different retailer on Instacart if a product was out of stock for every retailer except for Costco and Sprouts. So Costco and Sprouts were the only retailer where a customer would actually leave the app and shop directly with that retailer. So that really tells you that the retailers in this model are sort of commoditized, and it's the Instacart app that shoppers are really becoming loyal to.
So that's super interesting. I want to go back a little bit to the economics of all this. I think McKinsey and others have dissected the profitability of grocery e-commerce, and maybe a little bit of discussion that we often have on the podcast about what counts as e-commerce. But putting that aside, I take your point about the route density being really important to making the economics work. But there's still this phenomenon of, at least until we have drones or robots that are delivering stuff, that, you have a person in a car having to go pick stuff up. Have all the packing cost at stores, and then, going to the customer's home. It's a fair amount of labor involved, even when you get it very, very efficient. And I'm curious how you see that evolving over time, particularly since it seems with the pandemic, we have sort of this forced, so to speak, adoption of home delivery of groceries. So how do you, first of all, do you generally agree with that overall premise? And to the extent that you do, how do you see this playing out as we get out of the pandemic and people start to work on other ways to get the cost down and the profitability up?
Yeah, I think that aggregating demand and fulfillment across multiple retailers, at least in the back end, is essential. Fresh Direct, who I used to shop from living in New York, has been operating successfully for years with their model, and obviously they have their own warehouses and own brands and things like that. So that's one key. I think that the retailers themselves, any strategic direction that they choose, whether that's to continue partnering with Instacart in its current model or build their own technology or maybe license some third-party technology, they all have to look at store layouts and concepts like dark store, the micro warehousing and all these new paradigms of store layouts and how items are picked. Because if you believe that this is here to stay, which I do, then that shopping experience for the customer walking into the store is not that great when there's an army of Fresh Direct gig workers running around, like cutting you off in the line or whatever. It just doesn't. You can't serve two masters in the existing store layout. It's not optimized for professional shoppers, and the end consumer is not really pleased with the experience anymore either. those things have to change no matter which strategic direction a retailer chooses.
Do you have any concern that retailers will, I'm just guessing to a certain degree that a lot of, I don't want to say Instacart's success, but certainly the acceleration of their performance had to do with the dynamics of COVID, where, customers were much more willing to try home delivery and retail partners were much more willing to just try to make that happen, to respond to demand and stay competitive. But, what I worry about as we come out of this is that retailers start to say, I don't love the profitability of this. So either I'm going to, raise my prices, which presumably will tamp down consumer demand, or I'm basically going to do things to try to encourage customers to come into the store, because not only do I not like the economics of home delivery particularly, but also this, general idea that if I get you into the store, I'm going to sell you more things through impulse items and things like that. So it's kind of like I'm using this term loosely, but kind of merchandising your offering to higher profitability when maybe you can kind of get away with that because the pressures from COVID aren't so extreme. Does that make any sense to you or no?
Yeah, it does. And I will say that retailers have a choice right now, and there's a good spread of approaches here of whether they actually mark up their prices on Instacart to account for the take rate, for Instacart's take rate. So Costco, for example, one of the most successful retailers on Instacart, does mark up all their prices accordingly. So you pay a premium to shop on Instacart for Costco versus going to the store. So that is, and that's been their model, I think, from the very beginning. Still successful on Instacart. So I think retailers do have a choice there, whether to eat that cost or to pass it on. Yeah, it is a good question. I look at those surveys, those future behavior predictors of how likely are you to shop in a store in the future? I don't know. Those survey results really aren't worth the paper they're written on. We're terrible predictors of our future behavior. So I think we don't really know. I will say that there's two demographics where I see Instacart having great longevity with, and that is with seniors and very young generations. So the seniors, Instacart launched a seniors shopping helpline where they will just give tech support to seniors shopping on the app. And just anecdotally, I know of a lot of people who have helped their parents or grandparents start shopping on Instacart, and they're not going to go back to going to a store. It's just a great solution for them. And then the very young generations, I have a 4-year-old, so he's not quite yet shopping online, but people who have teenagers tell me their teenagers just expect everything to arrive within 2 hours, and they wouldn't go into a grocery store. And, this is just a generational thing. So I think that there is great use case at the older and younger end of the spectrum that's going to have great longevity for Instacart.
Well, the book is Instacart for CMOs. I imagine it's available in all the usual kind of places. Last question for me, and then I'll hand it over to Steve to wrap things up. What's next for Instacart? It seems like we're at an intersection point. Grocery has had a huge tailwind with the pandemic and the shift of consumption. And, has it accelerated grocery home delivery? Has it woken up grocers to, I better get that curbside pickup going, or somewhere in between? What do you see? After, it's a funny question after you just said predictions intentions aren't worth the paper they're written on, but I'm going to still ask you, what do you think's up next for Instacart, and what do you see in the future?
So there's some speculation that Instacart could create a model where they actually sell their own products and open their own warehouses. There's some speculation out there around that. There is, I think that is a path that they could go down. There's a company in the UK where grocery delivery is more widely used, a bit more mature. Delivery Hero started life as like a Grubhub food delivery and pivoted into groceries, and they rolled out their own stores, their own convenience stores called deem. So they actually run two business models, their own stores and the third-party retailer relationships side by side, and they integrate into a front end together. So that's interesting, and that could be a model that Instacart pursues. But I personally doubt that. I think, like I said, those relationships that they've built up with the largest retailers is a massive asset. And if they were to start competing with those partners, it would really turn sour a lot of those relationships. So I don't see them doing that. That's my hypothesis. I see them going the enterprise software route and developing the back end, and maybe some retailers will choose to come off the front end and just use Instacart's tech on the back end. And Instacart could charge a lot of money for that enterprise software. So that's my prediction.
I guess we'll see how that plays out. Certainly a lot going on in grocery, a lot going on in the last mile delivery world. So plenty to stay tuned to. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Kiri. I definitely recommend your book. I think one of the things that's great about it is that it gives a good overall high level strategic perspective, but it is, as was said earlier, a playbook for folks that want to implement any kind of partnerships or marketing using the Instacart platform. So check it out. And thanks for joining us, Kiri.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Michael.
All right, it's another week of Remarkable or Forgettable. Steve, let's talk about LL Bean results.
Yeah, I mean, their results, I think, were remarkable in a somewhat surprising way because they actually ran a pretty good sales increase for the quarter, and for the year, I guess, about 5%, which in the scheme of things is not amazing, but given how apparel has really struggled, they happen to be into home goods and recreational goods and more casual stuff. So I think that bodes well for them, and they've got a pretty good omni-channel or harmonized presence. But yeah, record holiday sales for 20 years, and they're also paying their employees their first bonus in 10 years. So yeah, it was pretty good. Some people were surprised.
So let's talk about RH. In some ways, no surprise. In another way, there's someone who went against the current, so to speak, and opened up these massive stores, but the results are just blockbuster.
Well, as you know, I talk about RH in my book, particularly highlight them in the chapter on memorable, and yeah, they've gone in the opposite direction of building bigger stores, more elaborate stores, and continuing to open stores. And they had a blockbuster quarter, both in terms of sales and earnings, and they're also doing some interesting things in terms of getting into real estate development and these guest houses and expanding internationally. So they've got some pretty ambitious plans. And I have said previously that when I first heard about this strategy, because I was at a conference where Gary Friedman spoke 6 or 7 years ago, and I thought he was nuts, honestly. So,
right.
And though at the time I didn't,
you weren't alone in that. You weren't alone in that assessment.
But it really truly is a remarkable story, remarkable results, and they're definitely taking some risks in terms of taking the brand to the next level.
We'll talk about taking the brand to the next level. Houston, we have a problem. Dallas, we have a problem. Bentonville, we have a problem. Some news out. Walmart's kind of brutal self-assessment. That an article we were reading about their relative skill in e-commerce. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I'd encourage people to check this out. So this internal presentation, I guess called Project Glass, is the name of their project, got leaked, and it's a pretty brutal assessment of where they stand. The one phrase that jumped out to me was something like, we fail our customers every day, and it goes through a list of things that they do, that they don't do, I guess, relative to Amazon. I think it's remarkable to be that honest, particularly when you're a brand as big as Walmart. And, in a lot of respects, they've done quite a few things pretty well. Now that
more well than falls short, for sure. I mean, Doug McMillan's done a great job with that shop. They've taken some risks, and they brought in Mark Laurie, and they bought some stuff, and they sold some stuff. But overall, I mean, a company that big, you've got to do something really different to move it, right? We'll talk about the cargo ships, but turning a ship like that in any degree is a big effort, right? It takes a lot.
Yeah, and I think you can, to me, what I really applaud them for is it would be pretty easy to rest on your laurels in a lot of ways because their sales results and earnings have been pretty good. They're investing in stores, or as you said, experimenting with a lot of stuff. But I think, you've always got to be comparing yourself to where you need to get to And particularly given how fast things are changing. And and also I think we're seeing, as we talked a little bit about in past episodes, there's this grocery war brewing with Amazon, as well as just, the ongoing competition that's been there anywhere. So I think this is pretty interesting, and a lot of other brands should be willing to take a hard look at themselves.
So from Wall Street Journal article, and we probably saw this coming, and we'll continue to talk about it, the retailers and landlords clashing on what exactly a sale is.
Yeah, I've actually been writing and speaking about this for a while. Some of this just relates to stuff we've covered a bunch of times, which is the reality that stores drive online and online drive store traffic. And, certainly we're seeing even more and more of this blurring. And when the role of the store does more than just transact in that physical store, and for the most part, you have traffic going down to stores and certainly many retailers losing volume in terms of stuff that's actually rung up. You can see how landlords want to say, well, we want to get paid for sales that the store is helping with, but may not get booked. So, I think this was inevitable. I don't know how this is going to sort out. It's certainly generating a lot of buzz, so that makes it remarkable, but it's not so easy to implement.
Well, I think it's interesting on both the front side and the back side. So on the front side, you've got your Indochinos, for example, menswear, where it's just really just a showcase, right? The deal isn't done. And then you've got retailers encouraging people to do the returns back to the stores. You could have negative sales in some stores.
Right. Yeah.
If you did it by the accounting, right? So that's, I think it's an interesting days ahead. Speaking of interesting, would you get a vaccine if I gave you a donut?
Well, there's a lot of things I would do for a donut, so I'm not sure that I'm the best person. But Krispy Kreme giving away donuts to people that are vaccinated. I think it's kind of funny that, on the one hand, we want to encourage you to take care of your health. And on the other hand, we're going to give you a donut every day. So, well, I guess remarkable in the sense that this is creating a lot of buzz. Usually when I talk about remarkable, it's more in the context of business strategy overall. But it's sort of interesting. I'm not sure I understand the economics of this, but good marketing.
Well, it is, and I think they're going to have to up their game though as the months go by. Maybe it's going to be a free ride on the glossing table, right? That you get through.
I'm there.
Grand prize. Just we'll put you on the glossing table.
Sign me up.
And no kidding. All right. Well, that's our latest edition of Remarkable or Forgettable. Tune in again next week. All right, Steve. Well, another great episode. We're back from Australia, back to the North American shores for our next episode. But for now, take us home.
Well, if you like what you heard, please follow us on your favorite podcast platform so you can catch up with all of our great interviews and insights, and new episodes will show up every week. Please take a minute to drop us that elusive 5-star rating and tell a friend in the retail industry to check us out as well. I'm Steve Dennis. The expanded and completely revised second edition of my best-selling book, Remarkable Retail: How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption, is out in April. You can pre-order your copy right now at Amazon, Indigo, bookshop.org, or wherever books are sold.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and host of the Voice of Retail podcast, and you can learn more about me on LinkedIn or www.meleblanc.co. All right, have a safe weekend, everyone, and Steve, talk to you next week.